Now, the lesson we've learned today is never do leg day before going on a run.
Yep.
Never.
Also, never squat Patrick.
Yep.
One time and then go on a run because your legs will also be burning.
Yeah. I feel like I'm far away from you.
Yeah? You want me to move closer?
No. Yeah, sure. Yeah. There we go. Yeah. There we go. It's a bit more
cozy wuzzy. Oh, my watch is falling off.
Wow. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Consistently Inconsistent. My name is Patrick.
My name is Eli.
And yeah, it's great to be here. Great to have you. I think this is the first time you've been on solo. Your second episode, though.
It's my second.
You were on the last episode.
Yep.
The Grant family one.
That was pretty crazy.
It was pretty chaotic.
But
you had a lot of funny moments.
I do my best.
Yeah, you do.
Wow. Yeah, I try.
Yeah.
But you know what? Sometimes I don't try.
No.
And it just happens. That's most of the time, actually.
Yeah. Tell the listeners and viewers a fun fact about yourself.
Fun fact about myself. I was dropped as a baby. That's my fun fact. Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Mama said it's okay.
Oh, she did?
Yeah. Because everybody knows now.
Everybody knows now.
It's out now. It's in the public. It's
Mom
in the public
dropped
eye.
Eli as a baby.
Yep, that's my fun fact, and that's why I am the way I am.
Yeah, he is very different to the rest of us.
I'm very different.
Oh yeah, Eli is a Grant. Eli is my brother.
Oh yeah.
Just in case that wasn't clear from beforehand. It's great to be here. Great to be back on the show. Great to be podcasting for everyone to be listening to us. And today, let me take a be real really quick.
Wow.
I meant to do that before we started recording, but I'm going to do it. Tell them a story.
Yeah, in the comments below, tell us your favorite be real.
No. What?
That was just my own thing. Fun story. Wow, okay. I'm not even half in it.
As well.
Well, a fun story.
It's okay. You don't have to anymore.
Okay, that's okay. I didn't really have it.
So on today's show,
recently I drew an Etch-a-Sketch of a painting
I'll put
that Patrick and Eva have in their household.
Yeah,
and for me, it was spot on. It was really good. So here's the problem. As you can see probably with the picture that Patrick's going to put up here, then it has a lot of lines, and the lines diminish the lines of the ship. If I had left the lines of the sky, then it would have looked really good, I think, actually. But because I did the lines of the sky, it just it really just messed with what the ship looked like. The ship without the lines looked really cool. Should have left it. Anyway, that's my story.
Okay.
Whatever.
That's great. It's a great one.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
And yeah. So for those of you that don't know me, I flippin' love Lord of the Rings. I've talked about on a past episode, me and Peter Peter and I talked about thank you. Tolkien a little bit, and how I think that he is probably the greatest storyteller of all time.
I didn't watch that episode. But yeah,
that's only a part one. We keep meaning to do a follow-up episode talking about it more, because it was a good episode, I think. But yeah, so Tolkien for me is a huge inspiration in pretty much all of my work. I think he's the absolute GOAT. Wow. As the youths would say.
They say that.
And everyone that's kind of friends with me or around me is kind of forced into then loving Tolkien as well.
Very true.
And so Eli, would you? Now this is I'm gonna say what I think, and then you're gonna say what the reality is.
Okay. Okay.
And I think that you were probably a Tolkien fan growing up. Probably, I think so.
Okay.
You like Tolkien, but then I think once I got really, really into him, I kind of forced you into it with me a little bit.
Yeah, I'd say. I think that happens with a lot of things. with like our entire family.
Mm.
I think because Colby liked woodworking, I love woodworking.
Okay.
Because you like movies and videos, I like movies and videos.
Uh-huh.
Like otherwise, I probably wouldn't like them as much as I do,
Okay.
or be interested in them.
Well.
Or like directors and all that, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this movie is I only like that because of older siblings.
Okay.
And so yeah, I mean, like if I hadn't had that influence, I probably wouldn't have been that crazy into Tolkien, because I probably wouldn't have known him as well.
Because I think it was when you came and stayed with us last summer.
Yeah.
Before you did Net, or maybe was it before you did Net?
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
so,
yeah, it was.
And I was like, Eli, flipping read the Silmarillion. And I forced him to read it, and he took it with him, and he read it.
I read it, and it took me like 3 months to read.
Yeah.
And it was so good, and it blew my mind and made me want to dive even deeper into it. And then Paddy got for Christmas, like all the books, and I was like, oh.
Shout out to my sister who got me all the books.
Crazy. Like those because
the extended legendarium of Tolkien is so amazing. And for those Tolkien fans that have like watched the movies or maybe even read the books and really enjoyed them, there's so much more.
Yeah.
Like, because when I was growing up and just watched the movies, I was like, I love these movies so much. And I would force my friends to like around Christmas every year, we'd sit down and watch the entire trilogy.
Yeah, that's right.
And then from there, then I don't remember how this love grew, but it did. It grew hugely, massively. I read the books. I actually read the Silmarillion first.
Wow.
And then I read the books. I didn't
know that.
And then I asked for all the extended legendarium, and I listened to mostly only Tolkien podcasts. Amansul is a great one to listen to. It's done by some Orthodox guys, and they talk about it, and they're good. Lord of the Rings Lorecast, I love it. He just like reads the things, and like kind of explains it and helps you understand. So that's how I actually read the Silmarillion, or was able to understand the Silmarillion. It's because I would listen to that and I was like, flip, this is a good story. Read the Silmarillion, and then was like, I need more.
Yeah, I think I was read the Lord of the Rings as a kid.
I was read them.
That was proper. I was read them.
Okay.
It's not proper.
No.
I was read them by.
You read them.
No. I was read them by Mama.
Oh. Okay. They were read to me. They were read to me.
I think both work.
I was read them work.
Anyway, somebody read them to me. My mother, when I was a kid, but I was really young, probably like, 9 or something like that. And when I was 9, I was crazy.
And they're good for kids.
I think so. I think they're hard to follow. They're really as a kid, I was like, oh my gosh, stop talking about trees for a full chapter. So but as an adult,
a young adult,
and a male adult, that now
satisfied
loves reading urge. And could just listen to Tolkien describe a leaf forever because of the way, the metaphors, the simile, the imagery that he paints is so beyond beautiful that I just want to read it forever.
So so an interesting thing before we kind of crack into the meat and potatoes of this episode. So a lot of people have a lot of thoughts about Tolkien, and the metaphors and the allegories that he puts into his stories, and people say different things. And from what I understand from the letters that he wrote to his friends, there's a book that I actually really want to get as well. Tolkien's Letters. I can't remember the exact name. I think it's Tolkien's Letters. Letters from Tolkien or something like that. But it's basically a compilation of a lot of letters that Tolkien wrote. And he talks about at the beginning, when he was writing Lord of the Rings originally, he didn't like the idea of allegory. He goes on to then say that as he continued, so like in the first version that he wrote of Lord of the Rings, then he did not intend for there to be any allegory, and any hint of an allegory was simply because of his Catholic values. But as he continued to revise and adapt the book and the story to what we know it to be today, he accepted the fact that allegory was inevitable and became more intentional about adding allegory to his story. Now, the story that we're going to talk about today, which is in the Extended Legendarium, so yeah, I don't even know how to start to get into it. Okay. What are you?
Well, so I've actually read the story. Patrick hasn't.
I haven't read the story, but
he's watched and listened to a lot of
podcasts,
things,
and I know the story.
So he knows it probably better than I do. And I read it. It took me 2 hours to read.
Yeah.
It's not a long.
It's
story
about 60 pages long.
Yeah.
In depending on which copy you have.
Yeah. And I think it's such an interesting. I wasn't. Patrick told me going into it. I didn't know what to expect going into it. He told me this is called The Mariner's Wife.
The Mariner's Wife.
Or in the actual text, it's called Eldarion and Arendis. And it's about these two Numenorian humans, men and women. And in the time of Numenor.
Yeah. So for those of you that are interested in reading it, this is going to be a spoiler episode, I guess you could say. Yeah. But the story has been out for years upon years. So we're going to recap the story really quickly. But if you want to read it for yourself, it's in the book Unfinished Tales. So Unfinished Tales of Numenor and Middle-earth. And it's basically Tolkien had a lot of stories that he intended on diving deeper into, but he didn't for one reason or another. And Christopher Tolkien collected a bunch of his notes and put together some kind of comprehensive story. Again, this story is unfinished, so it doesn't have a super concrete end. It does have a kind of ending, but it's not that satisfying.
It's really interesting, the ending,
so
slowly leads off into just
this story, I would say, is probably... I would say maybe just as sad as Children of Húrin.
Yeah.
Children of Húrin is heartbreaking in a completely different way, but this one is incredibly heartbreaking, I will say.
Yeah, within the Silmarillion at least, then you get very brief glimpses into a lot of the Children of Húrin, and yeah, some of those stories are just And he even Tolkien says, he's like, I wish I could dive deeper into this right now, but I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And then that's where the other extended books come from.
Yeah.
And you just you're sitting there and you're like, what have I read?
I know.
It's brutal.
I think one thing that I'm looking most forward to about heaven is just talking to Tolkien.
Yeah. Because okay, so my thing about Tolkien, I'm just going to go on a rant here about him for just 1 second. Because my thing about him is, I think the reason I love him so much is because he took what God gave him. He took that thing being made in the image of and likeness of God. He took that and ran with it. He said, yes, I am. And you know what? I am beautiful and I want to create just like my Father in heaven. He was like, I just want to make something awesome. So he did exactly what God did, and he created his own world, and he created it beautifully, and he knows each one of his characters individually, their entire story.
No.
Come on, bro.
He doesn't know Tom Bombadil.
Oh, who cares? He died before he could, really delve into that. But seriously, he really just he just knows them, and he in the Silmarillion, he's like, I wish I could tell you about this guy's grandchild because he did incredible things. And he could tell you about that grandchild and like what he did, but he doesn't, because obviously like that's like God telling us all the stories of humanity. But he made his own world, and he said, I create this, and I know my children, I know these people, and I'm like my father. I just like want to create. And he did, and he does it well.
So if you want to get into the extended legendarium, the books and stories that I would recommend first diving into: Children of Hurin, Baron and Luthien. Baron and Luthien is probably the easiest place to start, and one of the most beautiful stories. I literally cried reading it. Children of Hurin, and then I would say this one. Probably next.
And I mean, I haven't read like any of the Unfinished Tales other than that one.
The first one I think is it's about Tuor.
Okay.
Which is Turin's cousin. Anyway, that's a side plot. So today we're going to be talking about The Mariner's Wife, because I've just absolutely been loving this story recently. It's just very coincidental that those two podcasts that I mentioned, Lord of the Rings Lorecast and Amon Sewell, have both been kind of talking about it separately at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, I'm all for this. Because it's just the freaking greatest. I was like, Eli, you have to read this, because it is probably one of the most important stories that Tolkien wrote for our time that we're living in. Because, okay, we'll do a little bit of a recap of the story. So basically, there's these two Númenóreans. For those of you that don't know what Númenor is, in the Second Age, there is this island, and basically, it's this race of humanity that has super long life. So most of the line of kings of Númenor live upwards of like 400 to 500 years, 600 years.
Some people live 600.
Most of the others kind of live between 300, 350 years or so, which is an important note to point out for later. So there's these two Númenóreans, Arendis and Aldarion. Aldarion is the prince of Númenor. He is the king's son and
the heir to
the throne of Númenor. Arendis is just a woman.
She's from the
west,
the west of the Númenor. So she's kind of in like, it's like the same kingdom, but like Númenor is pretty big, and so like the west people wouldn't really like go too often towards the actual the main kingdom of
city.
And
so basically, I'm gonna keep on mixing up their names, Charlie. Aldarion loves the sea. He really loves it. I can't remember why he loves it so much. Does it say?
He was born, and his mother's father, so his grandfather, I can't remember his name, is Val something, Vanal. Anyway, he really loves the sea, and Aldarion kind of falls kind of naturally under his grandfather's, and he's like, he kind of took care of him as a really young guy, and kind of showed him how to sail, and he could sail a full ship and be the captain of that ship when he was I think 12 years old is what they said. And so he fell in love with it because of his grandfather, and his grandfather
took him out on his first voyage.
And gave him a ship. And
so Aldarion loved the sea. And so as he continued to get older, then he'd always be like, Dad, I want to go sailing. And his dad would be like, okay, that's all right. And so then Aldarion would go for like years at a time. It started out, he'd go for like 2 years, and then like then he'd come back, then he'd go for like 3 years. Over time, he starts a Mariners Guild. Is it?
He starts the what are they called? They're called something special, actually. They do have a name. I'll just find it.
Yeah, he's going to find it. We've got the book with us for referencing. But
the Guild of Venturers.
The Guild of Venturers?
Yep, Venturers.
And so, they go out and they sail, and they love it. And one of the times that Aldarion comes back from a voyage, then he's wandering through Numenor and stumbles upon Arendis. And is she riding a horse or something?
No. So
again, Eli's read the story.
Yeah. So basically, he comes back from one of his voyages and is chilling at home for a little bit with his parents. And they host a party when the king names him the heir to the throne. So at a certain age, 25, I believe, then usually they'll name their heir, and it'll usually be the firstborn son. It's never been the daughter. He's the sixth king. He'll be the sixth king of Numenor. And at this party, then a well-known kind of higher up ranking family from the west is coming to this party, and Arendis is the daughter of this wealthy merchant kind of guy. He's not really a merchant. And that's where she falls in love with Aldarion, and Aldarion doesn't even see her. Yeah. It's bonkers.
Yeah. But then he goes into the woods and sees her.
No, man.
No? Okay.
No. So let me set the love story. Okay. So he
don't be super narrative because we have to get to the meat and potatoes. We're just recapping.
I'm very logical. He goes back on a couple voyages, comes back every single time. So after this, then the queen, Aldarion's mother, sees that Arendis loves Aldarion and wants Aldarion to get married.
Yeah. Both of Aldarion's parents want him to get married because they're like, okay, we get it that you love sailing, but we don't want you to be sailing forever because you have to be the king someday. And so, like, we get it, you're doing that for now. But remember, we want you to settle down. We want you to get married, and you're going to have to settle down and be the king and take up your kingly responsibilities, which becomes a source of tension between Aldarion and his father. But anyway, continue the love story.
Yeah, so every time he comes back, then she's there waiting for him, and eventually he notices her and falls in love with her. Time and time again, like it's kind of like this. He kind of like falls in love, but doesn't do anything about it because he's scared. He doesn't want to get married. Yet.
He just wants to,
he just kind of wants to be in love with the sea.
Yep.
And so he keeps leaving, but eventually his father gets really mad and starts saying like, there was this little. They would tie this bow from a tree, onto the ship as it took off for its voyage. And usually it would be the mother of the captain, but eventually the king kind of banned that because he didn't want Aldarion.
He wasn't giving Aldarion his blessing.
So
basically.
Arendis would secretly bring it to him, and he was like, "Woo, I love her." So that's important. But anyway, moving on. After one of his last voyages, for a while, he really falls in love with her, and she goes back home because she's not seeing anything. She was like, she loves him to death. Like it says that she'll never ever love another man, even when he was gone for 15 years one time. And she waited and waited and waited, but she went back home after a while, and coming back and didn't find her. Then he realized he loved her and went over to the west to look for her. And this is where he stumbles upon her in the woods and thinks she's an Eldar. Thinks she's one of the elves.
One of the elves, yeah.
And it's not. It's obviously her. And he's like, "Oh dang, it's her!" And she like tries to run away, but he's really fast, so he catches up with her, and is like, "I freaking love you. Can we work something out?" And she actually says no. She says, even though I'll never love another man, I cannot love you because you love the sea so much. That's the basis of it. It goes into a little more detail as to why, but not really. And so for 12 years, then he kind of pursues her and kind of lives back and forth between her house in the west and his house. The king.
I think it's in between this time that Arendis' mom, Nuneth, kind of is like, Arendis, like, you love this guy and you got to kind of cop yourself on here because you really love him, and the only reason that you're not like letting him love you and like be in a relationship with him and causing yourself harm, like heartache, is because like of his passion.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like basically Nunith is just like come on, like just like do it, go where your heart is leading you.
Yeah.
And don't let his love of the sea get in the way of that kind of.
Yeah. So eventually she does kind of agree, and they're climbing this mountain as like a whole group of
before this then one of the times that Eldarion came back, then he gave Arendis a jewel.
That's true.
And Eldarion's dad was and so she's just like, oh, thanks very much. And Eldarion's dad is like, what the hell are you doing? Like, that's like, how can you not see that's basically like a betrothal?
Yeah.
Like most people that give that kind of jewel to a girl are like proposing.
Yeah.
So like, what the heck? Like, you gotta kind of cop yourself on here.
Yeah.
And so, but she carries this jewel around.
Yeah, she wears it like high on her neck. That's what it says. And he a smooth line by him is he's like, you shouldn't wear it so high on your neck because it like blocks the light of your eyes. And you're like, ooh, dang. But then she's like, I'm gonna put it even higher, and puts it on her head. And you're like, whoa. Anyway, so eventually they go up this mountain, and it's like this, I don't know, whatever yearly thing that they do, annual thing.
It's a pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Because it's where the temple is.
Yeah, it's where the temple is, or where the temple will be. I don't know if the temple is there.
Okay, yeah, sure.
But it's basically this mountain in the
very holy
base
mountain.
Of the
they're not allowed to talk.
Nobody's allowed to talk except the king. He's the only one allowed to speak. And so they climb this mountain, and everybody goes back down except them. And on their way back down, when they get to a spot where they can talk, then they basically have this long conversation about, like, why do you love the sea? You're crazy. I don't like the sea, but I love you so much. And Eldarion proposes, and they're betrothed. And they come back down, celebration time. But he feels a real call back to the sea. And so usually after about 3 years is when the marriage will happen, after a betrothal on Numenor. So after 3 years, then they're like, what the heck? Come on, Eldarion, you gotta marry her. And he's like, he feels a real calling to the sea. And there's this point that we actually skipped at some point where he is traveling over to her, and he sees the sea. We brought this up together. He sees the sea, and he feels like his heart wrenched for it, and he's literally like on the verge of like,
just running.
I'm gonna go to the sea. Like, I need to go to the ocean. But he stops that. He turns away, goes back, and rides to her. Yeah,
but whenever he gets there, then she's kind of like, I can see that you're not as in love with me. Like, what's going on? Yeah, and he's like, the sea is calling me, basically. He's just like, I felt it.
So after a lot of time, he actually doesn't marry her after the 3 years. I think it's like 5 years into when they're supposed to be married. He goes on another voyage, and he's like, I gotta do it. And I think he's gone for 6 years. He comes back. She's like just heart-wrenched, whatever, but they get married eventually. They get married.
Really beautiful wedding.
Really beautiful wedding.
The elves come.
The elves do come
from Middle-earth. Because whenever he's been going there, then he's been like chatting with the elves and stuff like that. They really like him, so they come over for the wedding, and they give 2 gifts, one to each of them, and they give Arendis 2 birds. Really cool birds that play a lot into the story, kind of. Yeah, they do. Metaphorically.
They'll come in later.
And they gave Eldarion this sapling. Of this really cool tree, and both of them kind of have their own responses to these gifts. Eldarion's kind of like, oh man, this is going to make great wood for boats. And the elves are like, no, this is a really beautiful tree that we just love looking at. And so he's like, okay, I guess I'll just plant it and not cut it down then. And the birds, then Arendis is like, oh, where am I supposed to keep these? And they're like, no, we've bound them to you through our magical elven powers.
Be in love with her.
We've chatted with the birds, and they're gonna stay with you forever. They might like leave and fly and do their bird things, but they're always gonna come back to you. And sometimes they're gonna be separated, and there's only gonna be one bird at a time. But just know that they're always going to find each other again.
And a really strong point is that they can't sing. They don't sing unless they are together.
Yeah.
So the birds, if they're apart, neither of them will make a sound.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're back together, which they always come back together, then they'll sing. And it's beautiful.
So they've got it. So they get married. They have a child.
They do.
What's the child's name? Yeah.
It's really like
It's a fun fact. It's actually one of the whole reasons that Tolkien
and Kalima.
And Calame.
Yeah. And Calame.
And Calame.
And Kalima.
So cool fact about that is so there's this poem called the Christ poem, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
Also, I'm pretty sure it's one of the O antiphons. So around Christmas time, then there's these 8 kind of hymns that the church sings called the O antiphons. And one of them, O Earendil, is what inspired. I might be messing this up a little bit, but I don't think I am. Google it. Somebody Google that.
Somebody. You. Yeah.
Yeah. You. Okay.
I'll do. No. Okay.
Is what inspired Tolkien to write a story about this guy. He's like, oh, flip! I love that name. And so then one of the other words in that poem is, I think, En Calame, which means brightest. So the whole thing is like, oh, brightest of stars.
Yeah.
So anyway, continue the story while I
so they have a daughter.
And
when she turns, so after a while, they're doing good. So Arendis really loves the woods at this point. So she's always really loved the woods. She doesn't really like when Aldarion like chops trees down to make ships, because he's really into doing that with the guild adventurers. But for a time when after their marriage, then they'll go down to the woods together and be and kind of look and plant. And the best thing is that he always replants. And the king actually gifts a house to Arendis in the west. It's this beautiful white house away from the ocean, and that'll come into play. But after a while, then Aldarion really feels a call. He's like, I can't. Like, I have to go back to the sea. I have to. His venturers, his guild was really pushing him as well. They were getting restless because he had taught captains to sail, but they really liked him as a captain, and wouldn't really go many places without him, and wouldn't do as big voyages. And his father was getting pretty darn angry, but his father really they made up a lot. Like they were really close. Even though they fought a lot, they were very close, him and his father. And his father's name is Meneldor or something like that. Meneldor. Yeah. Meneldor. Really good guy. Also interesting character. But they fight a lot, but they actually have a beautiful relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he finally is like, I just have to go back to the sea. And Arendis is like, please don't do it. She knows it's going to happen, but she is just like, okay. Eventually, he prepares and he says, 2 years. Give me 2 years away. And this is a really short voyage for him. He would have been gone for 8, 10, 12 years at a time. So this was really short. And she was like, okay, but if you break that, like a man's word is his word, right? It's who he is. And he says, I promise. So he goes, and it's on his daughter's 7th birthday. He leaves and gives her a big hug, and then races away. And once he leaves, then Arendis is kind of just downcast right away, and she's just not feeling it. He's gone for 2 years, and then he's gone for 3, And when that third year kind of comes, then she's like, oh gosh, I hate this man, and moves to her house over closer to her homeland in the West, and keeps her daughter there, and keeps her daughter away from any man. Like, just like, no men are allowed in this household. It's only female workers, maids, and like barely any contact. Like, if there was a messenger, he would be there for like 2 seconds, then leave. So her daughter never grew up around men, and she was schooled. She was like, she grew up in a good schooling, and learned a lot, but wouldn't see any guys at all. 6 years pass, I believe, or maybe it's 5 years, and he finally comes back and races to his father, and drops a letter off. His father's like, you've been gone for too long. But he's like, I got stuck, whatever. Blah, blah, blah. Lots of things happen with the ocean. And he says, you'll have to find your wife because she's not in your house. And he drops this really important letter off. Then goes to her house in the West, and she greets him, but not as his wife. She greets him as like this just random
stranger,
lord, basically, the owner of the house. And she says, you're whatever. Your wife has been really angry with you and missed you a lot, and very, very cold. And he comes into the house, and they feed him, but he's like, she was like, we've prepared a separate room for you, your own guest room. And he's like, oh gosh, this is bad. And in the morning, then he made up his mind to just leave, because she just is very spiteful and cold towards him. Mm-hmm. And he is like, I can't go until I see my daughter. I do have a daughter, right? Mm. And she's like, I think your daughter is around in the morning or whatever. And whatever, they talk, and the daughter is just kind of like, who the heck is this guy? Why did you wake me up so early? Yeah. And he doesn't reveal that he's the father, mm-hmm. Because she doesn't really know him that well. And whatever. Anyway, they move. That relationship is basically dead, but they're still technically, married, together, and married. And he kind of stays behind, and doesn't go on. Actually, he might go on another voyage. No, I don't think he does for a while. Starts chopping down a lot of trees to build stuff, and burns down his house because out of spite. And
he's pretty upset.
Yeah.
Did you talk about the letter? Sorry.
Not fully.
So the first thing that he did when he returned from this voyage, this 7-year voyage, his dad's like, where the heck have you been? And he's like, okay, I'm really sorry. The storm was against us, or the sea was against us. Got held up in Middle-earth. By the way, here's a letter from King Gil-galad, who is the High King of the Noldor, the elves in Middle-earth. And only you can open it. So then he leaves, and the king opens it, and it basically says like, hey, your son has been really invaluable to us. Thank you so much for sending him so many times. I'm sure that it was difficult for you guys, but like, he's given great wisdom to us. He's like one of the best shipbuilders that our own shipwright has like seen in a while, and like super just a great tool for us. Also, there's this rising evil, and we'd be really grateful if you guys like sent us like an army, to come and help us. And the king is like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can make that kind of decision. I guess I'm gonna stop being the king.
Gives up
and hand the scepter early to
Eldarion,
so that he can make the decision, because he knows a lot more about this kind of stuff than me.
Yep.
So basically, all those times that Eldarion was going, then he was going to help King Gil-galad and the elves of Middle-earth, because there was this rising evil. The men of Middle-earth were kind of starting to get a bit crazy, and the Númenóreans were kind of helping civilize the men of Middle-earth a little bit. because this is all pretty soon, relatively soon after the War of Wrath.
Yeah.
So like the whole world was in total upset after this war. Like a whole, like half of Middle Earth just like kind of fell into the ocean because of it. So like everyone was kind of still trying
shook nasty.
Yeah, shook nasty. I found this thing, by the way. I don't know where I got the whole En Calumet thing, but basically, there's this poem that is based off of O Oriens, which is one of the O antiphons. And O Oriens translates to O Morning Star, and so the quote that is taken from the poem, the Christ poem, is what Tolkien got, and it says, I think it's like in Old English, it says something like Eala Earendel. I don't know how to speak Old English, so I'm butchering this, but Eala Earendel Engla Beortast Ofer Middengard Monum Sended. I'm so sorry to anyone that knows how to do Old English. But in English, this means Hail Earendel, brightest of angels, sent over Middle Earth to mankind.
Wow.
That's so sick. So that's pretty much where Tolkien got the whole idea for starting the whole thing.
Yeah. So basically after that, then Aldarion becomes the king and names En Calumet his heir. Which is unorthodox because it's a new law that he sets as king that you can name a girl, your daughter, as the heir. And basically it goes into a whole bunch of rules and stuff about the new heir and like how that works. And like if she doesn't marry by a certain age, then she has to give up the heirship. And if she doesn't do all, anyway, it doesn't matter.
She becomes the first ruling queen of Numenor.
Yeah, exactly. After Aldarion, so Aldarion as king continues to go to Middle Earth on voyages, and Arendis is just never yielding. She just like is spiteful, bitter, never says a word to him ever again, basically, except for one time when she pleads and is like, actually I want to make up, but it's a false plea, like she's actually just messing around. And so basically the ending technically of that story until you reach like kind of the unfinished part is Aldarion leaves and goes to Middle Earth for a few, like 15 years, and he stays on land. He actually like kind of goes onto land for longer than he usually would, longer than like he's usually on the sea more than the land, but this time he's on land more than the sea. And she thinks that he's never coming back and that he's died, and Arendis kind of travels back. And it just says she died because of the sea. It doesn't say how she died. That's just like it was like written in a letter to one of the people that Arendis died because of the sea, so they think she drowned, but like it's uncertain.
Like it's kind of vague. It's like, did she kill herself? Like
did she throw herself into the ocean? She was always very scared of the sea as well.
Like she was, because like all throughout the story, then Aldarion is like, just come with me.
I want to share my love.
Like let's meet somewhere in the middle here. And she's just like, no, I will die if I go out to sea.
He just wants to go on this like little voyage, and
he's just like, what if we have a houseboat?
And he was like, I will make a castle on a boat so that we can live there. And she was like, if you put me on that boat, I will die. And he's like, okay. Anyway, and Calumet becomes ruling queen. And lots of crazy stuff happens with her. She's very spiteful and bitter in herself because she didn't have a father really, and her mother brought her up really poorly.
Men being around.
And so she was really bitter towards men. And her husband, which she eventually married, was like a really good guy, but she just like hated.
Also like her cousin or something.
Well, all of them are basically like cousins.
Also, we mentioned it earlier, but one of the important things, and why Aldarion's dad is always like, you got to get married, is because, especially when Arendis comes into the picture, is because they're like, okay, you've got time, but she doesn't, because she's not of the line of kings. So like, he keeps on going out 5, 6, 7 years and then coming back, and they're still not married. And they live to be like 300 years old, but you know, when he's living to be,
I think by the time they got married, he was 150.
yeah.
So she was.
They were basically
he was 70 when she was born.
Yeah. Basically, they were just constantly
derpy.
like, your biological clock, her biological clock is ticking.
It's riding out. Yeah.
So just really good story, super tragic. We're not doing it justice.
No,
just flip and read it, or listen to those podcasts that we recommended.
Read it. Yeah.
Just super duper heartbreaking.
It really is,
because like when you read, like when it gets towards the end and they just are so angry at each other and bitter and just unrelenting, then I personally just really felt that deep in my soul and was really, really sad.
Yeah, you could really feel it.
Because
kind of emanating off of her, because she was such a beautiful person.
There was one part, wasn't there, where she was just like, oh, if he had just apologized. Like when he goes back to the house, then she was kind of like, oh, if he had just apologized. Like she was kind of ready to like forgive him.
I don't think so.
No?
I don't think so. I can't rightly recall, but I'm pretty sure she was just like, no. But there was a point, like I said, where she was like ready to forgive, but it was a false kind of, like he didn't believe that she was actually, and it was kind of like a plot. But yeah, so what I was going to say is that she was very beautiful. So she's spoken of as like one of the most beautiful people to live, second only to like the Eldar. Even the Eldar who came and gave them the gifts were like astounded by her beauty. But in that later season where she became bitter, then even like her maids and stuff were just scared of her, and like her beauty was very distorted. And like she was very cold, white, just like white. I mean, because they called that the house she was in like the white like maid's house or something like that.
Yeah.
And another thing is that she gave the birds away. She sent them away. So those birds that the elves gave her, when they came to hang out at one point, while Aldarion was away, then she sent them away, and they went to her mother. Her mother, by the way, is the hero of the story. Went to Nuneth, really and Nuneth was like, "Oh, she sent the birds away. She must really have lost hope and is the worst." And doesn't know what she just gave up, and the birds fly away and go back to Middle Earth. And it's really like a metaphor for just like, yeah, she basically gave up hope on Eldarion, and just sent away her love for him, and that signifies, this is the sign of her love.
Yeah, I can't find it, but anyway, super good story. The reason that I think it's so pertinent to the times of the day is kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit on this. We spend most of our time talking about the story, but yeah, just go read it. I know it's a long recap, but yeah, I think that it's great because it shows the difference between men and women. And like part of me when I read this story just thinks, or not, well, I guess I haven't read it, but when I listen to the story, when I ponder this story, part of me thinks like this is so good because so many men today, like all they want is to just like, no, like it's like Aldarion at the beginning of the story. It's just like, no, I'm not going to get married because I've got so much time on my hands. And like I'll get married when I want to get married. I didn't even choose the king life. The king life chose me. It's not my fault. Just let me go to sea because it's what I want to do. Let me live my life. Yeah. And I think a lot of men today would be very, very similar. They're just like, I don't want to get married. I just want to live my best life while I've got it. I want to go and travel and sleep with women and party and get drunk every weekend. And it's kind of sad. Yep. I think that there's a lot of men that are kind of boy men, boys living in men's bodies, and I think and I can see where Arendis is coming from, where she's just like, no, like Aldarion isn't a man because like he's not settling down, Yeah. But then you kind of come to understand that he's going for a purpose, and he's actually going for really valiant reasons. And And yeah, like when it got to that point in the story, then I was just like, well, all throughout the story, I was like, I wish that they would just talk more and communicate more.
Yeah.
I think that's the main problem, is he never communicated clearly why he kept on going on these voyages.
Even his father was like, if you just said something, I would have been chill and sent you more, like, you know.
Yeah.
It was pretty,
So there should have been more communication from the beginning. There should have been communication when they got back. If they had just talked about, you know, their feelings,
yeah,
then they probably wouldn't have burnt down their house.
Probably wouldn't have.
And it's just super sad because like so many people today just don't communicate. I feel like communication is such a problem. People, instead of communicating their problems and resolving conflict, just go on their phones and seek instant gratification, or, you know, they turn to other things, drugs, alcohol, just anything except for facing an issue and actually just like facing what's in front of you and getting through a problem.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like, yeah, reading it, I could see that. And that's all you want is from them. You're just like, please just say something other than nothing. Like all they do is just like turn a cold shoulder to each other, and just like, it's kind of this back and forth of just like, how can I hurt you? Yeah. And like, maybe you'll change your mind because of me hurting you. You're like, what? How is that? That's so twisted. Yeah. Like, no, I'm just, it's whack.
Yeah. That being said, I think that I was saying to you earlier when we weren't recording this podcast, when you had read it, I was basically saying I love the arguments in it because they're like Tolkien does such a good job of like doing arguments in this story, because like it's not just like one person. Like I feel like in so many stories, so like for example the king, like Menelder and Eldarion, Menelder's like, stop going on voyages, or, you know, get married, or blah blah blah, and he'll make a point. And I feel like in modern stories the son would just be like, I'm going to my room, you know, like,
but they just like, they really, he's like, this is no, my, like, I find a real purpose, and like it's a very passion, and they kind of figure it out. And that's why I love their relationship as like father and son, because they do just kind of talk it out, and it's like
I love the conversation where he's like, you need to cop on, you're going to become the king someday, you need to like you need to focus on your relationship with Arendis. And then Eldarion is basically saying then, what does he say? He says, well, all these other wives, their husbands are allowed to do what they love. Like the ironsmiths are allowed to continue being ironsmiths. And then Menelder comes back and kind of says like, well, if an ironsmith was ironsmithing for 7 years straight, then he wouldn't have no one. There would be no wives. There's a specific line. It's like the mariner's wife is a horrible life or something like that.
Yeah, there actually is. And it was just over here. I just saw it. The mariner's wife is a horrible life.
It's something like that.
You want me to give me a daughter I've so long desired. There are other needs.
The mariner's wife is...
Oh, hold on. I was
He's close. We should have like put notes, sticky notes or something.
Yeah, we should have.
Beforehand, but we weren't that prepared. We only had a little amount of time.
No, that's too far. Where was we?
Is it a conversation between...
They're having a conversation here.
Who is it?
Menelder and
Eldarion. Anyway, while you're talking about that, or while you're trying to find that, then, I just love the arguments. I did... You found it?
Yep. Smiths may smithy, and horsemen ride, and miners delve. When they are betrothed, he said, therefore why not mariners sail? If smiths remained 5 years at the anvil, few would be smiths' wives, said the king, and mariners' wives are few, and they endure what they must, for such is their livelihood and their necessity. The king's heir is not a mariner by trade, nor is he under necessity. And then he says there are other needs than livelihood that drive a man, and there are yet many years to spare. And that's where they talk about how Arendis has a shorter hope of life. But then there's this other...
But where's the part there's a specific part that rhymes, and it's like the mariner's wife is a horrible life or something like that. I think it might be in a conversation between.
It can't be that
between a.
But here's one of my favorites. Oh gobby. Okay, so this is between. Wait, is that the right one? I think I lost what I was trying to find. Maybe. Well, this is between Nuneth and Arendis. This is like crazy. This really shocked me. Was this another one? So they're talking about, Aldarian and how like she just like can't handle her love for him. And Nuneth says, "All or nothing, Arendis. So you were as a child, but you love this man, and he is a great man, not to speak of his rank. And you will not cast out your love from your heart so easily, nor without great hurt to yourself. A woman must share her husband's love with his work and the fire of his spirit, or make him a thing not lovable." I think that's just like a man has passions, and those passions need to be controlled in some way. He can't just have raving passions and let that overwhelm him. However, a wife can't just quell those passions and suffocate them, because then that will kill the man. Like that will he will not be the man that she loves, and she has to, obviously then there's those crazy desires and passions, but you have to kind of embrace them and love them so that you can love him truly and fully, and kind of like make them whole almost, and make him whole, because you are one as a married couple, then you are one flesh, and so like your love is his love, and that's what Arendis really struggles with, because she's like, "I'll die if I go to sea," and it's like, okay, that's really dramatic. Like you should at least try. She never had like any trauma. It even says she never had a traumatic experience with water or anything like that. She it's so whack. But I think that's one of my favorites. There's another one between Aldarian and his father, I think, that I really liked.
Yeah, I'm really bad at finding pretty much anything.
That's fair. It's kind of all over the place.
Yeah. So if we had only just been more smart about this,
we could have done better.
Where is it?
But
the mariner's wife is a horrible.
I don't think it's ever said that.
Has a horrible.
But because I think it only says mariner's wife like twice. Maybe it's the mariner's wife has a horrible life, and the other one. But who knows? It's really interesting.
Cold is the life of a mariner's wife.
Oh, there you go.
What? So okay.
Who says that?
Let me give the context for it. It's a conversation between Menelder and Aldarian. Aldarian says, "Do I not study men all my days? I can lead and govern them as I will." And then Menelder responds, "Say rather, some men of like mind with yourself," answered the king.
Dang.
"There are also women in Numenor, scarce fewer than men, and save your mother, whom indeed can lead as you will. You can lead as you will. What do you know of them?" Burn. That's so sick burn. It's like, what do you know about
the women, idiot?
One day you must take a wife. And then Aldarian says, "One day, but not before I must. And later, if any try to thrust me towards marriage. Other things I have to do more urgent to me, for my mind is bent on them. Cold is the life of a mariner's wife, and the mariner who is single of purpose and not tied to the shore goes further and learns better how to deal with the sea."
And that's Aldarian said that.
Aldarian says that.
It's okay. Okay.
So he recognizes.
He knows.
He's like, "Look, I know that I don't want her to have a horrible life. So that's why I'm trying to get all my sailing out now.
And I also want her to enjoy it with me." That's what he says.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, but even though it's cold, then they have to learn to enjoy it together.
Yeah. So one thing that I thought, I was doing the dishes one day, and
not tied to the shore,
and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this story is literally." Now everybody about me knows that I love La La Land just as much as I love Tolkien. I'm pretty sure that this story, or La La Land ripped off this story, but basically like La La Land went in the other direction. So I think that this story is La La Land if if they had chosen to stay together.
Mm.
And so here's why I think that Aldarion is in the right compared to some people think that Arrendis is kind of like more in the right. I don't think either of them are in the right. I think they both needed to kind of be better people.
Yeah.
But I think that Aldarion has an excuse.
Mm.
And number one, I think Arrendis didn't have to end up marrying Aldarion. If she was so much like, no, like I'm not going to let him go to sea. I don't want him to go to sea. Then that should have been like a red flag. And I'm sorry, but you should have
recognize your life would be ruined if he did.
Everybody was saying your life is going to be hard if you marry him because he really loves the sea and he's going to keep going to sea.
Yeah.
And she was like, okay, she admitted, by her getting those warnings and then continuing on, and even him being like, look, I'm going to try my best to stay back, but like the sea is calling me.
Yeah.
Then I feel like she could have said no. She could have not married him, which might seem unfair because, yeah, she said, I'm not going to love any other man. But I think that in and of itself is a dramatic thing to say as well. She could have loved other men.
It's true. She waited 15 years.
Yeah.
She could have found somebody else.
So
especially because she was so beautiful and people came to her.
Yeah.
And she was like, nah.
Yeah. So I think that due to her own actions, she kind of brought it upon herself, which sounds like a horrible thing to say. Because yes, I think that Aldarion should have had control over his passions, but at the same time, they were good passions and good desires. They were not bad. If they were bad, then yeah, he absolutely should have had control over them. But they weren't bad inherently. They led to bad things because, for one reason or another, he ended up being gone for longer than he should have been. And that's not great. But at the same time, and again, so then you point towards today's society, and I think that men, here's another beautiful difference between men and women that I heard at one stage, is that men are really job oriented, and women are very people oriented. And so yeah, men need to work, they just do. They need to have their hands doing stuff.
Yeah.
And women don't necessarily need that as much. I'm sure plenty of women like working as well, and a lot of them work very hard as mothers or in offices or wherever it is that they're working. All women are hard workers. I'm not going to deny that. But men need to be working. I think women should be behind men in that. I think women should support men in that. Maybe I'll cut this out. This is getting borderline sexist now. I haven't properly, thought out my thoughts on it. Okay. on this aspect. I think the main thing that I'm trying to say, I'm not going to cut this out. The main thing that I'm trying to say is men and women are different. It's beautiful that they're different. There just needs to be communication.
Yeah.
And there needs to be an understanding. Each relationship is different, but there needs to be an understanding of expectations in the relationship, which I think each person kind of, I think she more than him was constantly like, no, you need to bow to my expectations.
Yeah.
Because he was always kind of like, let's just meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Let's meet in the middle somewhere. I think he was always very... Yeah. It seems to me like he was always...
She also ended up her desires, her loves, she actually started throwing away as well. Whereas his passions, his desires, he never once faltered in his desires. He never once faltered in his love for her until she obviously threw that away and went crazy. But she was in love with the woods, in love with trees. Yeah. But once... after she started hating trees, she started hating everything because it reminded her of ships and all that. And so it was her love, she was in love with these trees. And he was always very prudent in if he chopped down a tree, he would replace it threefold. So like he would plant more saplings than he took down, and he was very prudent in that, and was never trying to like really ruin nature or anything like that. He was trying to build it up, and she eventually just like hated everything. And it was obviously like her distorted thought of him, like he ruined everything for me, but it really is just her own heart twisted against him and against everything, and she just lost all hope in everything. And it just became this like hag.
Because you can choose healing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think she just chose to cling to bitterness. And blame.
Yeah, because either one should have initiated that first I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Obviously, Aldarian coming home, I can't remember exactly what he said when he showed up. I might find that. Because when he showed up to her house, then I can't remember if he apologized or not, or made excuses.
Yeah.
But she was just like, nuh-uh. And she, at some point, could have apologized. Mm-hmm. And, he loved her. He loved her.
Well, I'm not sure she necessarily needed to apologize. She should have apologized for, being bitter when he first got there. But, if he had apologized... Yeah, I think that he should have apologized, he was gone for longer than he promised, which is not good. But I think in her holding a grudge and being unrelentant in that grudge, then I think that's kind of where her wrong comes in,
It's around here. Come back to the fourth day. No, that's...
No, that's right. So go to the next page.
No, hold on.
No, it's right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm just finding the spot.
It's okay, forgive you.
I think it's this one here. But I think it's not. No. See, that's Thrawn. I think it's before.
Yeah, must be before. You went too far. Oh yeah, it is
right
before.
Here. Yeah,
no,
dingus.
Because that's where Menelder.
Dingus. That's what I'm saying. You the one who told me to go farther. Oh yeah.
No, it's before that.
Oh yeah, it's before this.
There.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, that's before that. Oh yeah, it's right here. Right, it's just about here. It's right here.
Finding it.
I will not stay. I am from home. Yeah. So when he first shows up.
So there's Menelder.
Yeah, hold on. Oh. Where's my home? Yeah, okay. So he goes to home.
Yeah, as he leapt from his horse in the forecourt, he saw Arendis. Clad in white, she stood upon the steps that went up to
But as he drew near, he saw...
I'm getting there.
Yeah, so fine, but as he drew near...
You come late, my lord, she said. I had long ceased to expect you. I fear that there is no such welcome prepared for you as I had made when you were due.
Mariners are not hard to please. that is well,
she said, and she turned back into the house and left him.
Then
two women came forward, blah, blah, blah. There's no lodging for you here. Go down to the homestead at the hill's foot. Horrendous.
Basically, she doesn't say anything to him at all. She just leaves.
Yeah.
And
yeah, so Aldarian just seems kind of confused.
But he doesn't really say anything either.
No, he's just
the problem. And then after that, then he's... Yeah, she says, you leave more promptly than you came, my lord. I hope that being a mariner, you have not found this house of women irksome already. To go thus before your business is done. Indeed, what business brought you hither? May I learn it before you leave? I was told in Armanelos that my wife was here and had removed my daughter hither. He answered, as to the wife, I am mistaken. It seems, but have I not a daughter? You had one some years ago, she said, but my daughter has not yet risen. Then let us rise her. Or
let her rise.
Let her rise. I go for my horse. So it's neither of them did. First of all, she just dipped out of the conversation every chance she could.
Yep.
he was being lighthearted and kind of like, I'm so sorry, but didn't say anything, like no apology. So
I think he was expecting like a nice warm welcome home, and then he was a bit kind of, I think, taken aback that it wasn't there. And then on top of that, angry. His wife was like treating him super cold. Yeah. And then he's just like, oh, I was told my wife was here. I guess she's not.
She's not
here.
And she was like, Yeah.
So yeah, just altogether very sad.
Boob.
Should have been more communication. Should have been more forgiveness, more mercy. Read the story. It's a fantastic one. Super applicable to all men, all women, all relationships. Don't be like them. I think what I love about this story, what I love about the Children of Hurin story, is Tolkien just sometimes wrote these super sad stories. Yeah. And you're like, flip, what are we supposed to learn from this story? And the point of it is that you're not supposed to do what they do. Yeah. That when we don't live a life of grace, when we don't choose the Christian way, when we don't choose mercy and forgiveness, when we choose to hold grudges and choose to not heal from our wounds, and hold bitterness in our hearts, then life is really horrible and we die in oceans.
We die in oceans and then and
our children become bitter.
And then their grandchildren become bitter.
And because this kind of really kicked off what happens to Numenor. Yeah. Spoiler alert, Numenor sinks.
Crumbles, man.
It sinks. By the time the Third Age, the stories of Lord of the Rings, when the story of Lord of the Rings happens, the Numenor has sunk. And all the Numenorians...
almost all of them are passed away, except the Dunedain, because...
Yeah, they remain true to the Valar.
Last little yeah, which is Aragorn. So
So any last thoughts?
Yeah, just definitely read it. I would say read the Silmarillion before you read any of those.
It's hard to read the Silmarillion,
but once you do, and really, I'd say if you're gonna read it, don't try and skip through that first little bit of like all those names, because you're not going to get a single thing. I tried to do that, and then I went back and read it again, and I was like, wow, first of all, this makes a lot more sense, and it's also more pleasing for me to read because I understand it now. So just read it, and read it slowly if you want.
The Ainulindale.
What?
That's what the first part of the Silmarillion is called.
Okay, yeah. Anyway. The creation story, basically.
Yeah. If you want to be able to read it and understand what's happening, I 100% recommend listening to Lord of the Rings Lorecast. It's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, but it's super good and will help you understand what is happening at the beginning. And even if you just listen to the first few episodes to get you through the names and all that kind of stuff, and it'll help you understand because it's super kind of poetic. Yeah. But then once it gets past the Ainulindale and into
kind of the
meat and potatoes.
Yeah, that good stuff.
I can't remember what the name for it is called.
I don't know.
It's divided in 3 parts.
Yeah.
Ainulindale, that blah, blah, blah. Quenta Silmarillion. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And then the Akalabeth.
Wow, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. I do. Yeah.
I'm so knowledgeable.
Wow, that's crazy. Because I've only read it once and haven't listened to any podcasts, so the names are really hard for me.
Yeah, that's okay. Really hard. But yeah, we'd love to hear back. We'd love to hear who you think is right or wrong, or whether. Oh, excuse me.
Or if you think our perception of the story is wrong.
Yeah, tell us what you think about our thoughts on the story. Can you see the similarities between La La Land and the story?
Which I can, but we won't go too much more into that. We won't
go into detail. It'll take too long. Flip, it's just so good.
Yeah, so there's lots. There's lots.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many intricate little things that you just have to read, and then like there were a lot of little hints that I'm like, wow, interesting. Why did they say that?
Yeah. And just take your time reading it. Eli read it in 2 hours. You don't have to read it in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. What does that say?
I don't know.
I think we're running out of time here. We've been going for a long time.
We have been. Oh,
Oh my gosh, excuse you.
that's awesome.
Anyway, thanks for joining us on today's episode.
It's been a cool one.
It has been a cool one. A bit rambly.
Yep, I've talked a lot.
I've talked a lot too.
Yeah.
Maybe someday when we both understand the story better and have notes, and we can
We'll
talk
do
about it
a
again.
second part.
Part 2.
Part 2, but this time we don't have to go through the entire story.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We can just talk about it. Anyway, love you, everyone.
Love you.
Check your privilege.
Yeah.
Check it.
And stay consistent.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
Awesome. Funky rainbow.
Bow, bow, bow.